Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Andrea Bentschneider. I'm a professional genealogist in Germany, and I have the pleasure of spending the morning with you here. And let me introduce myself to you. Some of you may know me from TV programs such as Who Do You Think You Are?, where I had the pleasure of showing, among others, Chelsea Handler, her German ancestry, or just a few weeks ago in Finding Your Roots, I was the one who discovered Bob Odenkirk's relationship to the Duke of Plön, and hence that he's a 13th cousin of King Charles. But I had the pleasure of turning my hobby into a profession 20 years ago this year. And I have a team. We're in Hamburg, in Germany, and it's a pleasure to be here actually for the first time. I've been online before in the years and had a few online presentations. But this morning, I'd like to answer any questions you may have about German genealogy. I have a few slides to get you started, but if we don't need them, that's perfectly fine. Anything you may want to know, where is the search book, or where can I find this, or how do I find my immigrant ancestor? I may not be able to get into all the specific answers, but I try to answer them as general as possible so that as many people as possible get information that helps them also to proceed with their own research. So are there any questions already that you're dying to answer? Wonderful. Oh yeah, please come up to the microphones here.
So my question kind of relates to German immigration from Germany into other European countries. My name is Hoferitza, and it has a very Germanic beginning to it, I think. But my ancestors came from Slovakia. So I'm just curious about the German immigration from Germany into that region of Czechoslovakia or Slovakia.
That was quite common. There were several migration streams also within Europe. Like a lot of Germans from the southwest of Germany went to Hungary, for example. So that's not an uncommon movement pattern and immigration move to move also from the west towards the east. It was also that many Germans went to what is today Odessa, and it was also to settle there, to have, because there wasn't that much population. And so, for example, also Catherine the Great, who was German by origin, also had German farmers come over to Russia. So it was really a matter of settling there, and there was land, and people had a way to settle and get a better living condition. And then only several centuries later, that was when the migration across the ocean happened. Okay, yeah. Okay, I will repeat it. The question was at what period of time in history that happened. Honestly, I cannot tell you, like off the top of my head, but I'm sure there's material online that could be checked, and maybe you have it also from the research you've done that you can see what time about it was. I know that towards the Hungary was in the 1700s, and so that usually was a time when it started already, respectively, when the settlement began. Yes, ma'am.
Morning.
Good morning.
In the mid-1840s, I'm having trouble nailing down exact time periods, a teenager, and this is family lore, ran away from home. The closest place I've been able to nail down is Prussia, which isn't helpful. I've spent almost 50 years trying to determine his origins. What would it have taken for him to leave home and get to New York City in the mid-1840s?
Well, probably, my feeling would be if he lived in Prussia and was a young man, then he was probably running away from being conscripted to the military. And that wasn't uncommon, and it was actually quite common to have 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds by themselves on these immigration vessels. And it probably was that someone from that area, another group of people left, and he just went with them. That's a possibility. I also once had I think it was a client's grandmother, and her grandmother was 18 years old, and she was the only German person on the ship that was full with Russian immigrants. And so it's like for her to travel at that age by herself, she came from Mecklenburg. I mean, for me, it's really unbelievable what they went through to get out of whatever situation they were in, and how desperate people must have been to do that. Yes, ma'am. Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah. Then we start here. Then we switch. Sorry.
Are you familiar with the term Goare Germans?
I'm sorry, which term?
Goare Germans?
No.
Germans in Slovenia, around Kočevje?
No, I'm not.
The question is how to sort out a problem. They are supposedly descended from 400 Bavarian and Thuringen families that were brought there about the year 1400 to act as warrior farmers. Their language is a variant of German. The question is, I've done Big Y, I have 3 matches, all of whom claim Slovenia as a home.
Okay.
The question then becomes, how do you figure out where in Germany they came?
Well, that's obviously very far in the past, so that's difficult. I would try to seek an expert for that particular area in Slovenia, because I'm sure that they know much better where the migration from Bavaria came from. So that's, I'm sorry, I cannot help you with this one. Yes, ma'am, sorry.
I have just a couple questions. One is easy, but I had an aunt, and it's been about 50 years since I've met her, and she is deceased now. She married genealogy. She went to Germany. She told me that she was already looking for the records and got everything there could be 50 years ago. That's way before technology. So I'm trying again. I have all her records. And she got me really started into genealogy because she was truly in love with it. And, but because she told me that she got everything that possibly could be attained, because they told her the rest of our records were bombed. It was in the Bavaria, Germany area. We're from Wackenheim, Germany, and there's actually a city there. I'm going to keep looking, by the way. If you know anything about Wackenheim area of Bavaria, there's actually a city there. I've looked on the map she gave me that has my maiden name, my father's name, because all the people came from there. They were wine growers. And so I would like to know how to pronounce my name in German. It was spelled R-E-C-H, and I am a musician, so I've just been considering the C-H like Bach.
Yeah, Recht.
So
Recht
Recht?
would be the name, yeah.
That's how I would actually say my name in German.
Yes.
I'm gonna start doing that. But do you have any ideas?
I would check really with the local archive, like it's probably a district archive, to see what they have available. Sometimes new records become available because they've been in the depositories and nobody has ever looked at them. Sometimes, as you said, like some records may be lost forever due to bombings or floodings or other catastrophes and events. So, but it's also always worth checking again and again if something new became available.
That's what I intend to do. So if you have any hints, I would love to know. I bought a book yesterday in the places where you go in there, and it's all about on family search, how to look for German records. So I'm hoping that will help.
Right, and maybe just head over to the Family Search Library, and there are plenty of people to help you through the collections.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Rech, R-E-C-H is Rech. Yeah? Yes.
First of all, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with us. We all appreciate it, all of us collectively. My question is about military records. Now, I understand, and you mentioned briefly, there was compulsory military service in the 1800s. What level are those military records found, and are they available to us today?
It depends on where in today's Germany you're looking for.
Well, they were Altenburg, Thuringia.
Okay. That should actually be good. There I would look at the State Archive, because that's where usually these records are kept. And Thuringia is better than Prussia, because in Prussia they had a military archive which was heavily bombed in May of 45. And so many records were lost there. However, some records survived, but they don't have name indexes with them. So if you're looking for a Prussian soldier, you really need to know what regiment and everything and when they served where. Otherwise, you have no chance to ever find them. So, but in other states like Bavaria, Thuringia, Saxony, it's much easier. So the State Archive of Thuringia would be the place to look for these records. Welcome. Yes.
I second what she said. Sorry, I'll stand back a little bit. Would you be able to share, I'll backtrack this a little bit. My great-grandfather was Hungarian, but he was born in the German Empire in Steinigen, Germany, I guess a little small town that's west. But his parents were in Hungary, so he immigrated to the U.S. in 1906 or 1907. We are wondering, was there a population of Hungarians? Why was there a movement? It seems like there was a movement of Hungarians at that time, and I think you answered the question about kind of the compulsory military service, because he ended up in the U.S., but he's I have a picture of him in a military uniform that nobody seems to know if it's American or if it's something else. So anyway, but if you could help with understanding Hungarian.
Yeah, but there it would probably really be better to start in Hungary with that question and then move your way backwards to Germany. Again, it's like, I know there was this movement, but it's just like very, in this frame, it's difficult to get into the very nitty-gritty details there and have specific answers. So I would need to look into that, and I'm happy to do that, but I cannot give you that information off the top of my head here right now.
I appreciate it.
You're
And
welcome.
unfortunately, the last name is Kish, which is...
Yes, not that easy. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have two questions, and one is military, but this is Navy. Do you have any idea on where to look for naval records? According to my grandmother, Heinrich Schultz, her father, was born in Breslau, Silesia, was in the Navy for his compulsory 3 years and maybe a fourth because he upset a commanding officer.
But that is actually, what time are we talking about roughly?
I'm going to guess 1875 to 1880, 81.
So if he was an officer, a good, we have 6 federal archives in Germany, and each one has a different responsibility and a different collection. In Freiburg, the Federal Archive is a collection for the military records, those before World War II. Those with World War II and World War I actually are in Berlin. So if you're talking the 1870s, and if he had an officer rank or something,
He upset the officer.
yeah. But that would be a place where I would start looking for him. Otherwise, I mean, Navy usually speaks for something in North Germany, and there might be Kiel, might be interesting also because that usually was the seat of the German Navy.
Okay, and church records for Breslau, Silesia.
I would start at the usual places like Family Search, My Heritage, Ancestry. There are definitely there are websites that are just specified for these regions and where you can get information about which parishes which parish records exist, where you would find them. And okay, wonderful. Okay, the gentleman, I just repeat this so that everybody can hear this. The gentleman mentioned that there are a lot of Silesian church records at the Family History or Family Search Library. They were transcribed and can be researched there, but didn't go further back than 1740s, if I heard this correctly. Okay, wonderful.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your expertise with us. I have two questions.
Sure.
The first one goes along very much with the first question from the gentleman about migration from Germany to, in my case, Bohemia, southern Bohemia. My father's side of the family, my maiden name is Kaiserschott, which sounds really German to me. I've traced them in the Czech Republic back to about 1680. And my theory is that they must have emigrated from some German-speaking place at that time, like maybe the 30 Years' War, when the population was decimated afterwards and they were encouraging immigration. That's my theory anyway. So my question is, how do I try to find a Kaiserschott in the mid-1600s in Germany somewhere?
I would go about it a different way, and so I was just trying to figure out if I can start a different slide here. There is a way, and it's mentioned in the handout, there is a possibility that there, we have a association for computer genealogy in Germany, and they created name distribution lists where you enter a last name and it will show you where the names were distributed. The one list is the one listing is from 1890, and that's based on the list of the casualties from World War I. And the second list that they have is based on a 1996 telephone book CD, which then had everyone in Germany who still had a landline. It was right after, a few years after the Berlin Wall came down. So you get pretty good picture of where names can be found today. In the older one, based on from the 1890s, it still gives you an idea. Are they more in the south? Are they in the north? Are they spread out everywhere? And that really helps you pin down a place of origin for a name.
Okay, all right. Could it also be associated with principalities? I know in the Czech Republic, the nobility and my people worked on these domains or whatever, principalities. So my thought is also that maybe the same noble owned property in Germany as in the Czech Republic or Bohemia. So would there be a way to proceed to find that connection?
Honestly, I'm not an expert on Bohemian research. I'm the president of the Association of German-Speaking Professional Genealogists. And we do have an expert there who is in Austria and who covers that area. So in the handout, there is a, there is also the, I'm going through last night's slide because it has the, let me just get to the page where it shows the last name distribution list. Here we are. Oh. So basically, this was an example where I searched the last name Holz, and it shows the distribution of the last name Holz. So in this case, this last name is too common to really have any conclusion of where the person that I was looking for. The question behind it was, we had a Friederike Holz who was born in Schönfeld in Prussia, and there are 25 Schönfelds. And so it was it was this idea of how do I find which Schönfeld it could be. So obviously with this last name, it wasn't really helpful. It didn't provide an answer. And then also the next one, again, this is the 1890, and so in green now you see where Holz is today. So even that, and so you don't have two clusters that are matching where you could say that really is that. But if you have a more unusual last name, that is a real great source to go to, and it's worth checking out.
Okay. Just one other quick question. The other side of the family, Podevels, my mother's side of the family, all from Germany, but they're actually from, today it's Poland, up by Gdansk. Just to the west of Gdansk up there, close to the border. Any recommendations? Do I start in Poland then, I'm assuming? Polish records?
Yes, but Gdansk was also longer a part of Germany than the rest of Poland was. So there too, you will find records on Ancestry, you will find records at Family Search, you can find records at MyHeritage. It's always worth checking out these databases. Also then for specific areas like Pomerania or West Prussia, there are local genealogical societies, and they do know their records. They have websites where it says, from this village, it's like you find records in this archive. These church books have survived the war. So that's also always worth checking out. This is, I just entered it, this is the email, the website for the Professional Association of German-speaking genealogists. And that's where you can find like also then contact information for my colleague who does research in Austria, Hungary, that area.
Right, thank you so much.
Welcome. Yes, ma'am.
I have a dead-end line that's been a dead end since I was a little girl. My mom's been searching for a German immigrant who, anyway, in her local county history, it gives the name of a Frederick Lambert who settled that area of Virginia in the early 1800s. And all it says is he was the son of a German immigrant. So we have no idea what part of Germany he came from. We've looked at ship records for the last name it was anglicized to Lambert. And we've been told that was probably originally Landbert, something that means land bright. I don't know if that sounds familiar to you, but I have no idea where to start. We've looked at ship records. He's in the 1850 census in Virginia. He himself, Frederick, was born in Virginia, so we're trying to find his father, who was the German immigrant.
Okay. Probably the last name, I would think that the last name is too common to be conclusive for you on this last name distribution list that I just showed. Oops, hang on. And usually it is like if you cannot find an immigrant, it always is you need to start first in America. It's like with a complete unknown to go to Europe and try to find them in Europe doesn't make much sense. So what I would do is look in the surroundings, like in the family, look in the families, look if you have any information about business, anything where you may find information, like maybe he had siblings, and maybe in the siblings' marriage record you have a name of the father all of a sudden. So there may be other ways, so not just focus on him and the father, but also look at who in the family may have information, who in the family, like again, produced a document where it gives a name all of a sudden. So that's where I would look first. It's the fan club, exactly. I spoke about that yesterday. Do I have this here? How fast? There we go. Oopsie. Sorry. Okay. Basically, it is the fan club is the abbreviation for F for family, A for associates, that could be friends and neighbors, and or N is the neighbor, basically. And they could be, let me see where we have that. Sorry. So, but basically, that's where I would look. I would not just concentrate on this. Sorry, it's stuck here somehow. That's too far. Okay, forget about it. So it's just like you I would look for any other family members, friends, neighbors. Maybe they came. That's another one. Maybe they had neighbors that came from the same town. You know, they often went together. So it's worth checking, like who was living in the neighborhood.
Okay.
And maybe on the census record, maybe you have someone who has a similar last name and has like in that area. So that's something worth checking out, and maybe with that person you can find more information.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, ma'am.
My question is about passenger lists, immigrants to New York, 1860s. I'm having trouble finding people that I even know the year they came in. And my question is, are there any tips? I mean, I've tried all sorts of different variations of the names, and is it worth going through the volumes of Germans to America?
It is. It is worth going through them. Actually, it was a program by a university in Philadelphia, and a friend of mine was, as an intern in Germany, and as part of his studies, he was involved in the project, so I know it's a really good project. So, and that basically covers the gap that the missing lists from Bremen left. So that's definitely worth checking out. It's also always important to remember that Ellis Island opened only in the 1890s, and before that, if anyone arrived in Manhattan, it was Castle Garden,
Right.
where they arrived. So there's a database for that as well.
Okay.
So, and sometimes it really is, some people change their names intentionally because they didn't want to be found. Some people, it was just changed because they couldn't read or write, because they didn't have a proper education. Usually the rural population went to school for like 4 to 6 years at the most, and the only they could do was to read the Bible, because that's all why they learned to read, basically. And so again, some people were running away and hiding their identity, and so it is maybe difficult. But
Yeah, I have them in Germany and I have them in New York. It's
okay,
just
understand.
getting
Yeah.
from one spot to the other.
Okay,
is the
then you
point.
may want to look at, like, where did they come from in Germany?
Oh, from Hessen
Okay,
and Bavaria.
wonderful. That's good, because like at the Hessen State Archive, they do have files of immigrants, because particularly in Hessen, you needed to file for a permit to leave the country.
Right.
And so these files exist.
Right. And I have some of them, so
Oh,
I know
okay,
the
good.
date. And so
Okay.
the problem is I just can't seem to find the passenger list. Short of going through every ship from Germany to New York page by page, that's what I'm down to, which is like for a
Yeah,
whole year,
and then again,
right?
it's like, and they could have left through Rotterdam, they could have
Right.
left through the Havel, they could have left through anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank
Sorry.
you.
Yes, ma'am.
So you touched on my question. It's also about immigration and the permission to immigrate. Where would we find those records? Are they available? Or where do we look?
These immigration files that I just spoke about, or, okay?
Yes.
Well, they are usually kept at a state archive level of the state that it's in, where they immigrated from originally, and not all, well, many, you had to file with your local government to get the permission to leave the country. And you were discharged from being a citizen of the country, the state you lived in. But if there was a chance that you may be rejected and that you didn't get this permit, then obviously people just took off and left without ever asking for the permit. And even in states where these permits still exist, some of the collections may not be complete. So just because there's not a file for your ancestor doesn't mean there was never one. So it's also always, whatever source you check in Germany, it's also always important to see how, or to ask the archivist, how complete is this collection? Were there any losses? Some collections, only 60% still exist. So that's always something that needs to be taken into consideration.
Okay, and the area we're looking for is in Altenburger?
Oldenburg?
Yes, and so
They have actually a wonderful database with immigrants that left from Oldenburg. The local society in Oldenburg is very keen and very much into genealogy and very supportive. So that would be also otherwise a good address to.
would start there or three? Is that right? Okay.
Wonderful, thank you.
Just want to ask real quick, I pulled up your website. How do I read it in English?
Which one? The one that I just said?
Yeah, the one.
Berufsgenealogie. It's an English website. Like, you can change the language to English and German.
How do you do that?
There should be a button on it. Oh, look here. Exactly. So, as we were on that topic. But anyhow, yes, please, ma'am.
Hi. My father came from Sudetenland, and I cannot find any records from 1907 on. And I don't know if this website that you gave us for your genealogy society, should I write to this lady to find out where I can find those records?
What you can do is, what you can do is, for all, like, since the Sudetenland is now an area which used to be Germany but isn't Germany anymore, we have, there is one civil registry office located in Berlin, which is the Civil Registry Office 1. Let me type this in here. And it's, in the German word for it is Standesamt 1. And what it is that it lists all the civil records of any event like a birth, marriage, or death of Germans abroad. And that includes those regions like Prussia, West Pomerania, East Prussia, that used to be German, that is nowadays a different country. These civil records are located there. Some of them are online at Ancestry, if you have the international package, and can be researched there, so that's worth checking out also.
Okay. My second question is,
Yes.
As I go back and look at my ancestors and their last names, the majority, the origins of their last names are Ashkenazic Jewish names. Do I pursue that avenue or not?
Why not? Sure.
So how would I do that?
Well, Ashkenazi is usually more from this, there too you would need to have any idea like what region they came from, like to see where it's coming from. Ashkenazi is usually the German Jews, which they covered all of Central Europe, and so there you really need to pin down where they came from.
Is there a place where it says specifically where these Jews populated places,
Since
or
they
not?
moved around a lot, it's like with every kind of genealogy, you need to have a name, you need to have a date, and you need to have a place, if possible, to really start where to start with it. Since Jews adopted different last names over times, it's like if you look for them in the 1820s, they may have had a different last name than in the 1700s, and so that's why it's nothing where you cannot go about it the same way how you do with Christian genealogy.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
Hi. My grandfather left us a handwritten family tree, and at the top of it, which was his grandfather, he said it was a von Schirmer, and the von has been dropped. So is that a sign of nobility?
Yes and no, and oftentimes it isn't.
Well, the thing is...
Sorry, hang on. Sometimes it's just also a measure of, sometimes it's just an expression that they were from a certain town, so the von stood for from. That's how it came. I don't know why the slide with the context is empty. That's what I was looking for, sorry. And so what time was that?
It was in he came over in the 1840s. He was part of the Aldisburden, I think is what you call it, in Texas to make a colony.
Okay.
And so I'd like to find a list and some more information about it, because I think I could probably find out what he did.
But usually it was really, if they were noble, they wouldn't drop that title. It was rather the other way around, that people who weren't noble took on a title. Yeah. So if you had it, and you wouldn't drop it usually. And
So is there a place to find more information in Germany about the Aldisburden? I think I've exhausted the one in Texas, so.
I know that there's a very good association in Texas that is specialized on the genealogy for Germans that came to Texas, so that would be a great place to start. If you come and see me afterwards, I try to get you that name.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I don't know why they were there. In the end, yeah. Sorry, yes. Sorry, we're
Morning.
having like all my slides are empty. I don't know.
No problem. Going back to military conscripts,
Yes.
1870, Gritzel, Ostfriesland.
Sorry?
Gritzel, Ostfriesland.
Yes.
They fully died in a battle. How do I find records of the conscripts?
They should probably either be at the State Archive in Aurich if it was for East Frisia or Ostfriesland, or at the State Archive in Hanover.
All right, thank
There
you.
they are for sure. Thank you. Yes.
Hi. My husband's cousin married into a German family. The parents immigrated here, first generation. He married a first generation. His father-in-law was in a Hitler Youth. They were forced to be in it back then. And he's wondering if, and I, because he helps me with the genealogy, is there a way to find those records?
For Hitler Youth, not, because it wasn't like kind of almost everybody went through. There are no records for that. It just would have been if it was a, let's say, like there is some of the organized associations, there are records, but the Hitler Youth or the Bund Deutscher Mädchen was just like too broad that there weren't any records that survived.
Thank you.
You can find partial records of the membership of the NSDAP party, National Socialist Party, but for the Hitler Youth, there wouldn't be any records.
Okay, thank you.
Hi. Okay. Let me give you a little bit of context first before I ask my question. So my family is from Germany. I don't know exactly where, but what I do know, and I'm hoping to see if you can help me with this with a little bit of context, is my family immigrated to Chicago, Illinois from Denmark. And I have done some research within Denmark, and I found out that they are ethnically German, and they were living in Denmark. There was a small town in the south of Denmark that was named Haverdal within Denmark. And there were about 100 German families who had moved there to work on the potato farms. They called it potato Germans. So they moved because there was free land and there was no tax for several years. And so they moved there from Germany, and they stayed there for several years, and then they immigrated from Denmark. So I'm wondering if maybe, I think that my family might have come from Schleswig-Holstein, because it's right there, it's right across the water there, and that's right where the potato Germans were. So I guess I'm just trying to find a record of that, because it seems like those 100 families that immigrated didn't really have any records there. I'm having a hard time finding that. So my last name is Dahl, and it is from Germany, and they kept Dahl moving to Denmark, and then when they moved to America, they ended up continuing to use that name. So I guess I'm really trying to figure out that connection there. So there are people who did live in Denmark that were German, so I did find that, but I guess I'm asking you, I don't know if you know any information about the potato Germans that lived there, the lands, the houses. They have a museum there now, and they do know that these Germans moved there. But before that, I'm really struggling to connect them to where they were from, specifically in Germany. So it could be, I don't know, maybe Bohemian records, but if you have any suggestions about anything related to the potato Germans.
So my first guess would have been also that it's the nowadays, what is today Schleswig-Holstein, which is like the most northern German state that borders with Denmark. What also speaks for that is it used to be the Duchy of Schleswig and the Duchy of Holstein. And what speaks for it is that that country was under Danish rule since the 1700s. So even people in Schleswig-Holstein said, the people in Schleswig-Holstein didn't want to be Danish, but since they were technically under Danish rules, they were sometimes considered being Danish. And the good thing is that in Denmark, it's one of, there were regularly census records taken. And in contrary to all the other German states. So for Schleswig-Holstein, there are regular census records which will help you then also answer that question and find them through the census records. There are 2 associations in Schleswig-Holstein, also genealogical societies with volunteers who are transcribing these census records into databases. And they are also publicly available for research through the Copenhagen or the Danish Rijksarchive, basically. And if you see me afterwards, I can give you contact details and where to find more information.
Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay. Yep. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. My family, I've been able to kind of reconstruct where they came from because the Breman Records of their immigration were destroyed. Comes from a little town, a little farming town, Borkendorf, in Dutch Kroine, West Prussia. Talking to Bärbel, I'm sure you probably know who Bärbel is in the German area. Okay.
Right.
She said most of those church records had been destroyed in the war. Is there any other society in that area that might have records of the families that lived there?
Again, it depends a little bit on the time. There are
1868 is when they emigrated.
Probably not. Well, if Bärbel Johnson says there are no records, then there are no records. So that's basically, Bärbel is great, Bärbel is an expert, and so that's definitely trustworthy when she says there is no record.
I just wondered if there was a society that maybe kept some other type of record for that area.
Well, if it comes to later years, then it would be worth there are records in one of the federal archives for those families that fled then and during or after World War II, that came then to Germany. They went to the authorities. They told about the families that lived in the village, and so that some of these records that way were kind of kept or created again, but that's more for the 1900s and later, so you wouldn't get any records on these earlier immigrants. I don't know, if they owned any land, there may be something about that. There may be legal files, but that would then be in what is Poland today and would need to be searched there.
Poland. Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Guten Tag. I have several questions. First of all, do you have a suggestion for a timeline of German history that would be helpful for ignorant Americans with Heinz 57 background? Because we just don't know what happened when that might impact our ancestors in their migrations and immigrations. And to go along with that, a good change in boundaries and maps from the kingdoms of Bavaria and Prussia and Baden to, from Austro-Hungary, all that to throughout time.
I do have slides we have to see. There seems to be a problem with the presentation because half of my slides are empty. That's why also particularly the slide with all my contact information isn't on there. This is my website, so if you have any questions, the email address is info@beyond-history.com. Also on the handout, there are also contact information for me. So let me see if I go back to this and see if this, there we go. Hopefully this works now. It doesn't. Okay, then we just stay with this. Basically, the history of Germany was that up until 1871, there were all independent kingdoms, grand duchies, free cities, etc. And in 1871, the German Empire was founded, and for the first time there was one government, there was one, it even took until 1891, I think it was, to have one common time zone in Germany. We used to have 40 different time zones in Germany, if you imagine or not. So, and before that you had 36 to 45, depending what time you were dealing at, individual states sovereignties, etc. So you had different currencies, you had different, like, an inch wasn't an inch everywhere. It's like they had different measures, they had different weights, and it was really, and due to wars and everything, it constantly changed, and it always depends on like the area, and they are usually like websites. I know that Family Search has a big wiki section where they do explain a lot too. Otherwise, it's really just checking out Google, and then otherwise looking at a local, like a more local level. The Family History Library or Family Search Library also has a big collection with literature on Germany.
And my last question is, for church records, were there some crossover? Were Protestants married in Catholic churches and Catholics married in Protestant churches? So, I mean, my evangelical ancestors were super easy to find. German Catholics are as bad as my Irish Catholics. They're terrible to find. Can't find them at all.
Okay.
So should I look in Protestant churches as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. If they lived in an area that was predominantly Protestant, it's very likely that they married, like Catholics married into it. And I've seen contracts where they signed and where it was made clear that the family afterwards is Lutheran, that the children had to be raised in the Lutheran faith, and that whoever was married in Catholic, like,
and the vice
Catholic.
versa, if they married
Exactly.
in a Catholic
or
church.
vice versa, if it was in the same way how in the times before the Jewish civil records were started, which was usually after Napoleon, after the 1812-15. So before that, it was also that the German priests, Lutheran, Catholic, etc., were asked to record Jewish births, etc., in their church books. They weren't too keen on it. That's why many of them didn't do it. But that generally, technically, they were supposed to do it. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
A couple of questions about maps. First of all, you showed the map with the distribution of names.
Yes.
And I looked through the handouts. I don't see a reference
Okay,
for that. Is that available?
Yes, it is. I will put it up here afterwards and then leave the slide on. Mm-hmm.
Do you have a booth here, by the way?
No, I don't, but you can see me here afterwards or outside. Yeah.
Okay, okay. And then another question on the maps. So I understand, my name is Panicky, and the German records spell it P-A-N-E-C-K-E.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how you would say that in German.
Panicke.
Okay, and so they around Magdeburg in that area. And so is there a mapping program that I should be using where I can pin the locations of the records so I can go back to it and reference? I know the Myers map shows, and my great-grandfather immigrated in 1888. So we're going from there back with the records, where you can pin it and go back to it and kind of see what the distribution of the records are. Is there a map you would recommend?
There are, well, with Magdeburg, first of all, to get to the church records, those are located at the church archive in Magdeburg. However, more and more of them become available on Archive now.
I just found two just within the last 10 days.
Yes. The other website is like where you can find Lutheran church records.
I saw that on your handouts, yes.
Exactly. So, and then they have an English version of the site too. Otherwise, it's like the Myers Gazetteer only starts in 1871 with the German Empire, so that's also important to be kept in mind. So if you look at that, whatever they say, what the local level, governmental level is may not necessarily be the same as the time when your ancestors lived in that area. So it's usually what I would then suggest is contacting a local genealogical society, because they do have the nitty-gritty details. Usually for every kingdom, every different sovereignty or state in Germany that existed, there is specific literature where you have that information.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Morning.
Good morning.
My ancestors immigrated from the Alsace-Lorraine area, border with France, and late 1800s. What I'm looking for is sources to find the address. I know the town where they live from the marriage and birth records, but is there any source to get addresses?
If the town was too small, oftentimes they didn't really have addresses, and they knew if they lived in building 98, everybody knew what building that was. So I'm not sure. Even in the territory of what is Germany today, it varies greatly of like where address books existed or where any records about the houses existed. So it's really a case-by-case basis, and it would need to be checked on a local level. Maybe they have a city archive or a district archive where one could find that out. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hi, so I'm trying to find out if I have missing children in my immigrant ancestors' family. So we know the family had a child about 1840, and then because we have the father's death record, we know the ancestor left from a Diepholz County to Bremen by about 1845, but we don't know at what time. And then in 1848, they arrived in America, and then 1850, they had more children. So there's a 10-year gap. They had children 1850, 1852, 1854. So every 2 years. So they may have been apart for that 10 years, but they also, I just don't know how long they were in Bremen, where to look for records in Bremen, if it was common for it to take several years before they could get on a ship, if they were just waiting to get on a ship for several years, or if they had moved there intentionally for some other reason, or, you know, so that kind of thing. And then just how do you work with the state archives? I was lucky enough to go to one once, but if I'm long distance, how do you work with the state archives? And where would you find those immigration records for Bremen?
Okay, in Bremen, there is the local association, like in Bremen, is called Die Maus, like the mouse. And they called it because they're collecting all kinds of information. They have wonderful databases up on their website. Put it that way so that you know. So they have a close cooperation with the State Archive in Bremen also. And that's why they have access to records. So if possibly in one of their online databases, it's worth checking out, entering the last name you're looking for to see that. To wait for several years for a ship I would think is unlikely. Maybe they traveled, they got stuck there for a reason. Maybe they ran out of money and couldn't finish. Who knows what happens? And I think that those are unfortunately these individual circumstances that we may never find an answer to today. And but that's where I would start with regard to research in Bremen. And then with regard to state archives, well, they vary greatly, as I shared yesterday, like in Schwerin, for example, which is the state archive for all of Mecklenburg. It's like during the last couple of years, 10 archivists retired. They've only replaced 2 so far, so you wait several weeks to months to get an appointment. You're not able to see half of the collection because there's no one there to hand it out to you. And so some archives are open. You can go there without an appointment. It's easy to deal with. Others are more difficult to deal with, where they really make your life miserable when you get there, even as a professional. And so I always kind of have my way of how I prepare for a visit to an archive. I usually call them ahead of time, try to get my questions answered, and then see that I can order as much as possible ahead of time. For birth records that happened in Bremen, they could be in church records, but they also could be on the databases that the mouse have. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Would the state archives also have a conversion of the 18th century addresses, Elferdischen Eins, to current addresses? Zum Beispiel.
Well, I'm only aware of a book that exists for Hamburg, because in 1937, Hitler decided to add certain towns that were surrounding Hamburg to the city of Hamburg. And so that's why Altona, which used to be in the Duchy of Holstein and belonged to Schleswig-Holstein, is now a part of Hamburg. And so with that, they started a new address book where they then listed all the streets that existed in 1937, plus what their former names were, if there were 10 main streets from all the areas that were put together. So it was the main street in Altona, but now it's called whatever street. And so that is something I would always like. If you're looking for address books, usually some of them are online already digitized, but usually for bigger cities, that's something where I would always ask a local genealogical society or also in city archives. Like it's more on a local level, it's not on a state level. State archives usually have more records that are more of a, let's say, like governmental importance, like immigration wasn't governmental tool. But usually, like you wouldn't find a church book in a state archive. Of course, there are always exceptions to this, but usually those would be rather in a municipal archive, more on a district or local level, or in a church archive, yes.
And agrarian farms, manors, Landgüte. Would there be any records in state archives or anywhere else?
Usually there should be land records available.
Where?
Land records
Land
should be
records.
available. And again, it's like if I'm not sure where I find something, I always start as local as possible, like with the town office, town archive, district archive, and they usually know their way around and can point you to places where it's going to.
Vielen Dank.
So yes.
Your Berufsgenealogie has an expired certificate.
Oh, okay.
All right, you need to notify the webmaster.
Okay, I will do that. Yeah, thank
Okay.
you. So I see that we only have 3 more minutes left. So if there are any more questions, like I'm happy to see you outside probably, or contact me through my website. Yes, sir.
My family immigrated in 1910. My dad was born in Leipzig. I would like to get acquainted with, go back to Germany and get acquainted with living relatives. Can you suggest how best to find those people and get acquainted with them?
Okay, how to find living relatives. There is a little bit the challenge with the data protection laws that we have in Germany. So it's any birth record that's younger than 110 years, you're not allowed to get access to unless you can prove that you're directly related, which means you're a sibling, a child, grandchild, or parent. So otherwise, no chance. But there are records, so you would look at like your immigrant generation, you would see what siblings they had and then see what children their siblings had, and you would work your way around. You can do this with address books, for example. There are maybe some historical church records where they also give you that information, and you can, at the end, if you have a name of a person where you know that they lived in, I don't know, the last 20, 30 years, you can ask the German authorities and request an information for their residence. So they may give you an address where they last lived, and that way you can contact them, or you do it through online phone books.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I've traced one of my lines back to a small town called Winkheim in northern Württemberg, and they immigrated in 1752. And when I get there, though, I can't find any church records on them. They were Lutheran. The only church records in that town are Catholic, which I've checked, and they're not in there. So is there any kind of help that would show like during a certain time frame where Lutheran records might be held for that town that may be covered by a different parish?
And
this is in northern Wertheim near northern Württemberg near Wertheim.
Okay, there I would then probably check with the local, or the state church archive in Stuttgart. I would contact them and ask them about this, because they should know who was in charge when and where at that time. And otherwise, there is this publication which was done by Kevin Hansen. It's in the is it in the handout? Yeah, the books, the Map Guide to German Parish Registers. That also shows clearly what villages belong to which parish, like both in terms of Lutheran or Catholic records.
And that's on the handout?
It's on the handout, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Nope. We have 30 more seconds. So no pressure on you
Quick
now.
question. My ancestors came to Philadelphia in the mid-1700s. I believe they came from the Rhineland-Palatinate region. What port do you think they left from?
Probably I would think from the Netherlands, probably.
Oh.
So we have 10 seconds. I just want to say thank you to everyone outside. I answer your question in a second. Thank you so much, because I know we will be cut off from the live stream in a second. So thank you. No, but to answer your questions, I would say that I would think that they went rather through Dutch ports, possibly.